Hello hero, it is Lucy Lannon. This is your DIY custom built ultra personalised and aesthetic epic, so let's write in some mythical magnificence together so you can live it up and soak it in differently to how you did yesterday. Today we're going to be looking at the Holy Moon in Cancer, which is happening to within half an hour of this broadcast if you're seeing it live, and then the consecutive few days of the Crescent Moon as it continues to move through the signs. If none of that means anything to you, just know that I do these lunars maybe 4 times every month, certainly 4 times every lunar month, covering 2 phases each time. So if you do want another update after this, if this works for you, please do consider subscribing and we can kind of check in with the general energies every few days. That being said, this is a general reading, so it may not resonate for absolutely everybody watching it. Please do use your own discretion and apply things as you see fit, because with a large audience, the things that I'm describing will kind of apply in different ways to different people. And I'm just getting a broader view of the currents involved, let's call it that. So beginning with the archetype cards, we've got Father in the reverse, that's interesting. And then today we are using the Neon Moon Pixel Occult Tarot, one of my favourite decks. Let's just riffle it. As well as the This Day I Am cards and my DIY love deck, which in this case probably will not be for love, but we're kind of using it just to take the temperature of the times. Something I was channeling before I got here was a song by Grandaddy, and the lyrics were, "I'm on standby, out of order, well sorta." So that may apply, but we'll get further into the cards and we'll see. Are we taking all of these? First 3, okay. What do I want to say about this? I think that's it actually. Let me just carry on through this shuffle and whistle as I go. Something I should have mentioned at the beginning, if you haven't seen my readings before, this DIY deck does contain 50% negative messages, because love do be like that. So if you see something that seems particularly harsh, just know that it's part of the setup of the deck. These are messages for me, not necessarily things that a person would say to you. And also, as I said before, they're not necessarily love-based. This is just giving me an idea of the kinds of energies that we're dealing with in a more general sense. That said, if you did want a love reading from me, there's an entire playlist for that, and you can book in the link below at my shop. I'm going to continue with the This Day I Am cards. Right guys, I'm sorry the spread still appears a little bit chaotic, but I don't want to sort of knock the frame by rearranging, and I'm just going to power through this because there is a distinct theme, and in some senses it follows on from last month, but in others it is very much about you in a slightly different way. And I dare say that if you're stumbling on this reading, or you're coming across me for the first time and seeing this as a timeless rather than a lunar, this is about your attitude to a specific person in your life as it relates to your beliefs about yourself, what it is that you're capable of, the kinds of interrelationships that you deserve, right? And I put that very strongly in inverted commas. And that's what I mean about it relating to last month in terms of drawing boundaries with people who are maybe wanting to draw on your time, energy and resources when you're not in a place to give. So if that hits, you might want to check out some of the readings from the previous month, which was the Oak Moon. More broadly, what do I want to say? Okay, let's begin where I began, which is with this Father card in the shadow. This could mean for some of you that you're working through, I dare say, daddy issues or something to do with authority. That could be a workplace thing, just because of the sorts of cards we've got. But I am a channel that deals with sort of the internal and how the internal becomes the external in some way. Excuse me. This is like a love colour as well. I feel like we're dealing with self-love, but that may be, I don't know, I always feel, and this may even relate back to the reading, but I always feel that when we talk about issues to do with self-concept, to do with self-love, to do with the externalization of the internal sphere, it almost seems like a cop-out as a reader, right? Because I think a lot of people come to me expecting me to describe very explicitly their personal circumstances. And certainly, particularly in the lucky dips, a lot of the time I do that. But it seems like these lunars are focusing on growth development in a way that is both more general and more internal. It's kind of, let's work on who you think you are and why in order to see what's happening in your day-to-day life. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't circumstances described in here, and it doesn't mean that I'm not doing my job, but I do feel, again, as it was with, I want to say week 4 at least, of the lunars last month, this is very much a reading about how you relate to somebody specific in a way that both informs and is informed by your self-imposed limitations, shall we say. And I don't mean that in the negative. I mean it in the Saturnian way, that boundaries are sometimes very useful. Limits are sometimes a good thing to have. It's just that occasionally also they are limiting, right? So when I speak about father in the shadow, if it doesn't resonate that you're having daddy issues or stuff to do with a father relationship, or indeed stuff to do with fatherhood for some of you, then I think it's sort of to do with an energy of externalization of authority in some fashion. And you may have been somebody who's found that in my other readings recently. That's not because all my readings are the same. That's because it's a current moving through the collective at this time. And I'm sure that if you go back far enough on my channel, it's no longer present. And I'm sure that at some point it'll move out of all of this as well. I mean, when we talk about a moon in Cancer, yes, we're talking about the maternal very strongly, but we are sort of referencing the 4th house, and that can be about fatherhood as well. It's certainly about ideas picked up from early life. So I'm going to tell you to have that in the back of your mind as I speak more about the present day, right? But the shadow attributes, it's dictatorial control or abuse of authority. This could be you abusing your authority over another person, but for the vast majority, I feel like this is an external circumstance you're rubbing up against with somebody who has power over you in some way and is to some extent aware of it. And because it's father, what I want to say is that this person's natural role, or the role that you would prefer for them to be in, is something to do with protecting you in a way that helps you to flourish. Now, that I don't mean literal security. Many of you are more than capable of looking after yourselves. What I'm getting at is this kind of feeling of, I'm getting an image of somebody, of like an angel putting a wing over a person, right? And whether or not you resonate with angels, it's just this guarding, I'm hearing Mondo Show on, so it's this guardian spirit kind of energy. It's like somebody in your life having your back to the extent that you can almost kind of forget that they're there in a grateful way and continue with what it is that you were going to do. So for some of you, a minority, you were meant to be that figure for a person and they're expressing distress that you didn't kind of do that, and they can't be on their way with their own stuff in order to give back to you. But as I say, for the majority, this is a feeling of lack of reciprocation, but also a feeling that if somebody specific doesn't have your back, you can't get over the mental stumbling block of like, okay, I'm just going to get on with my own shit, right? A lot of the times in law of attraction, law of assumption communities, and indeed magical circles, depending on the sorts of magical circles, we have language about just letting go of what people in your worldview are doing and getting on with your own shit in order to kind of change what those people are doing. Not in a manipulative way, not in a way that doesn't include free will, but more in the sense that, like, once you have yourself covered, reality can conform to your will in some fashion. Now, I do believe that, but I think that your problem, certainly as of late, or maybe between these two phases, is that you can't kind of get away from how somebody's acting enough to just be your own active force within your own life. So for many of you, we are talking a romantic relationship here, and we're talking about something you're wanting to manifest into your reality. For others of you, like I say, it's a workplace thing with an authority figure, or something familial to do with authority as a concept that stems from how authority figures treated you as a child. When I say child, by the way, I count up to like early 20s. And I know that sounds patronising. I'm not saying if you're in your early 20s and you're watching this that you're a kid. What I am saying is that childhood in terms of self-concept encompasses all the points until the brain is fully developed, which I think happens somewhere between 21 and 23. So if you had stuff go on in your teens that was particularly distressing for this kind of stuff, these kinds of subjects, that is very much what we're on about. It doesn't have to be that you were 5 and somebody did something dramatic. It can be that your peers, your teachers, etc., informed your view of the world in a way that was still child brain. And again, not saying you're a child if you're younger than, I don't know, 23, 25 on this channel. I very much respect your adulthood. What I am saying is that I need to encompass a very broad sphere of possible influence in terms of how you relate to other people when we're talking about these kinds of issues, because stuff from a formative age stays with you, right? Blimey, that was long-winded. I'm sorry about that. I think you're shifting from this statement over to this statement in the sense of somebody feeding back to you. Let me make your life a little easier to show you how much I care is either something you wanted from another person or something you wanted to be for someone that you're now feeling distressed that you can't provide. And I think actually, rather than being about that externalization, this statement is more something I'm going to ask you to turn on yourself and say, how can you make your own life a little easier to show yourself how much you care? I know I bang on about self-care on this channel. I'm not talking add a drop of lavender to your bath. I'm talking, what is it about your life that you've been making harder recently? Because this first stage of the Holly Moon is going to be a time period where you're examining where you've been standing in your own way in that specific sense, right? What little rituals, what stuff at home particularly, because it's a Cancerian moon, have you been, what kind of stuff have you been doing that is holding you back rather than pushing you forward? And if this person's feedback didn't exist to you, how are you still self-sabotaging is what I want to say. It doesn't need to be that it's in a big major way. I know self-sabotage is one of those statements where people are like, oh God, it sounds massive and awful and I'm a terrible person. That's not what I'm on about. I'm just on about, like, if you're trying to lose weight, have you been buying crisps, right? Chips if you're American. If you're trying to get closer to somebody, have you been freaking yourself out about how they might respond to that, etc.? You know, just do the basics for yourself to make things a little bit easier. That's what I want to say. And then by the end of this, I was going to say this month, so that might be a more broad thing, but by the end of this period at the end of the Crescent moon, i.e. my next lunar video, this statement, am I freaking you out? I feel this is coming from whoever this is in relationship to. And I think at the beginning of this period, you're saying, yes, you are freaking me out, or I'm freaking myself out. And by the end of it, I think you'll have come to a place where you're saying, no, actually, you're not freaking me out. You can do whatever it is that you want to do in your own reality because I'm functioning in mine in a slightly different way. And that does actually invite somebody to change their actions. I don't think that change of action is going to happen within this period, FYI. This is, I did have the dates written down, I've lost them. But this is a period of usually like 6 to 10 days, these two phases together. And I don't think that that's going to encompass a complete turnaround of someone in your life, if this is referring to someone specific in the present, which for many of you it is. What I do think is that your turnaround internally will be so massive during this period that you are more able to deal with whatever the external is throwing at you. So let's get into it a little bit more with the cards. 8 of Zent in reverse, this is the equivalency of the 8 of Pentacles. This is not being willing to work on some shit. I think that if you're dealing with a person, they're being very stubborn. They're being they're either waiting for you to come to them, or if there's an issue that should be collaborative, they're just not collaborating with you. Excuse me while I check the camera. Yep, we're all good, we're still on screen. There's something about that, excuse me, because I'm hiccuping. excuse me, this is always a confirmation for me, guys. Something about checking the camera. You're kind of constantly checking in on the state of things with this person. For some of you, you're in a Page of Swords energy where you're spying on somebody online, or you're kind of sneaking a look at somebody else's desk at work, or just kind of going around the houses with friends to see whether there's an update that you can ask about in a very sort of peripheral way, to get an idea of what a person is going to behave like next. I don't think this is healthy for you, my dude. I don't think constantly checking on the circumstances is always good if you're trying to bring something about, whether or not law of assumption is your paradigm. Even in a magical sense, you don't want to be like sticking your head round the door like, is it ready yet? It's kind of like opening an oven to see if your cake is baked, right? And letting all the hot air out. It's going to delay the process. The other one that I always think of is something my mum said about my dad once, where she was like, he will plant a seed and then dig it up to see if it's sprouting. I feel like that's what you're doing with this, and I understand why, because this is a very frustrating energy. This may not be so personal for some of you. It may be just somebody at work isn't pulling their weight and you're trying to check in on that. Maybe you're sending too many emails, too many memos, or you're just kind of micromanaging their project, because this is very project based. This is very like functional, stage by stage kind of thinking. It's very earthy. It's got that Taurian bit from your end in the sort of management of things, but from their end in the stubborn as a bull energy of like, no, I'm not budging. I'm not going anywhere. This is what I've decided upon. I'm going to luxuriate in it, right? And I think if you get anything from me from this reading, it's like, they're being stubborn, let them be stubborn. Focus on you. Bring it back to your sphere of control. Bring it back to how you can further a project completely by yourself. If this is a love manifestation, bring it back to being the sort of person who is already in a relationship, or who already has a highly functioning relationship with someone. If this is a work thing, do the maximum that you can do to demonstrate to the people around you that you have done your part, because then it will show that another person maybe has not pulled their weight. You know, and extrapolate as you see fit if this is a slightly different circumstance. But what I want to say is, within this time period of a few days, go to the very limits of what it is that you can achieve by yourself. And in that way, you will focus the energy back onto you that has been given to somebody else. You have gifted your energetic resources to somebody who doesn't necessarily have your best interests in mind. And I don't think that that's necessarily malicious or selfish on their part. I think they could just be going through some stuff. But I think that the more that you dwell on how they're not pulling their weight, the more angsty you're going to feel. And that's not going to be good as we move through the rest of Holly month. When I think of oak and holly in interrelationships, I think of like the oak king and the holly king. If you're not familiar with the folklore, don't worry about it. But it's kind of a transference from one half to another, from the apple bit of the year to the blackthorn bit of the year, from benefic to malefic. And I don't want to panic anyone when I say that, because the Holly King is equally powerful, but it's this kind of, it's a shift from everything is good and summery into everything is to do with darkness and pulling in and examining and being in a bit more of a hostile place. And in this, I think that this person has kind of represented that hostile place for you. But I think if you're going to take advantage of Holly month as it is, you need to step into the energy of like, I'm okay with hostilities. I'm still a king either way. I don't have to be the oak sunny king. I can be the lunar slightly worrying king, right? I hope that I'm describing this in a way that does it justice and comes across okay to those of you who aren't sort of based in those paradigms. But basically what I'm getting at is the shift this month from last month is that you've been giving your energy away to something or someone that is pulling on it more in order to activate qualities in you that couldn't have been activated if we were still in a happy paradigm, if everything was still going all gravy. That's not to say that last month didn't have its challenges, but I think that the first bit of this month might feel more challenging to you purely because for your maximum growth, you're going to have to come up against other people not agreeing with what it is that you want from your reality. And I think this is exactly what this stubborn little shit is doing. But they have to be that stubborn person to gift you the version of yourself that can say, it's not going to freak me out either way, I'm fine. I've done my bit. We're all good. This Three of Wires, this would be the equivalent of the Three of Wands. So you're kind of planning, projecting. There's maybe a travel element involved for some of you in terms of connection to this. But with the broken glass around this person looking onto the city, this makes me feel like a broken mirror. I'm seeing that bit of Mr. Robot in my head where Elliot is looking into the mirror and he's seeing reflections of like other Elliots, of Tyrell, of Sam Esmail, I think, for a tiny bit of it. Really cool nod. But he's kind of dealing with fragmentation of the self as he looks into that broken mirror. This is what it's been a symbol of for, you know, since mirrors existed. And I think that having this particular deck come up is because it wants me to nod to that. It wants me to say, you're looking at yourself in a broken mirror right now. You're making plans based on ideas that you have about external authorities that are no longer accurate for you. And instead, as I said with this card, you could be focusing on what it is that you can see within this tiny sphere that has fucking nothing to do with the way that you've made your identity thus far, or that you've imagined that this project, this relationship, this friendship, whatever, will go. And something that might be useful in doing this is clearing your head by literal travel. I want to say travel on water if you're able, if you're near a body of water, or just being kind of by watery things and out and about in the fresh air. I think that will help to clear your head to get you back to yourself with this. And by self, I don't mean this image that you've constructed thus far. I mean the self who can deal with this in a very direct way. I want you to ask yourself, the control and surrender reading I did ages ago might be relevant, but also I was kind of shit then in terms of YouTube, so don't worry about it. But I want you to ask yourself what is within your sphere of control with this. Even if it's a tiny, tiny amount, even if all you can do right now is make a sandwich for tomorrow's self who will be busy with the project, then do that, right? And I think it's going to alter this person's trajectory, even if, like I say, you won't see the results over the next few days. I'm sorry, by the way, if you're new and you're disliking that I'm swearing. This is something I do. I don't feel it inhibits my expression, but I'm getting a thing, because I've sworn a couple of times so far, I'm getting a bit of feedback from some of you that like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Don't worry, okay? If you really hate my channel, I would invite you to go somewhere else or check out another video instead of downvoting, but you do you, because it all helps the algorithm. I'm just saying, apologies if my language is not how you would express yourself, but again, we're talking about what can you do within your sort of range that you can control, and not what is it that you believe about the world, right? And that includes whatever it is you believe about me. I think this message is still for you, even if you're not a fan of the way I express it. And I'm pulled to say that, so apologies for any subscribers or people who are fine with it. It's just a message for people who are stumbling on this. With the star in reverse, there's a big question here of whether you're the focus of your own life. And when I say focus, I don't mean in a selfish fashion. I don't mean self-centered. I don't mean everything revolves around you. I think we can sometimes blur those boundaries when we're talking about things like manifestation. And to an outsider, we can seem self-obsessed or like we don't care about the circumstances of other people. That's not what this is. But this is saying that if your circumstances have mirrored back to you a reality that you don't enjoy, how is this taking you out of a position where you are, as I said in my last reading, the operant power within your own universe, right? Star in the upright is very main character. Star in the reverse is sometimes a blockage towards healing, a blockage towards progress, or a kind of sensation that there's too much work to do before you are the star of your own show. And particularly with the imagery in this deck and with this laptop, it's like an inhibition about presenting to the outside world in a specific way. Note that I just spoke about how I'm presenting, right? So these energies are leaking into the adjacent cards. But it's this thing of like, the way that you are operating is in a self-conscious fashion. And it's sort of self-conscious in a way that isn't useful to you. It's not self-conscious in, am I acting in a way that is cohesive with my internal values and for the benefit of everybody's highest good? It's self-conscious in a way of, did I fuck up some way that meant that this stuff happened, that meant that I'm blocked, that meant that somebody else is easily able to freak me out, or that they're not there for me, or that I can't be there for them? You are on standby. I was just about to say something and then it went straight out of my head and I went back to that Granddaddy song. I think that the version of you that can handle all of this is something you've put on pause for some reason. And maybe we'll get to that reason, maybe we won't, but I feel like it's important for me to say this. And with dressing for success being the kind of activity, that's not just because like Barbie's going to be out in this time, we're all going to be in our glad rags having a great one, right? And it's not just a shallow sort of vanity thing. It's presenting as the person that you know yourself to be at the core that is able to deal with all of this. I'm thinking about the Marie Kondo thing where when she's asking you to go through your wardrobe stuff, she also says, like, don't keep anything that's just for kind of schlomping around in. Don't keep sleepwear that is stained or full of pulled threads or whatever. Like, make sure that you're the self that you would want everybody to see. And that's not in a sense of everyone is watching me, oh God, what do I do? It's not a social anxiety thing. It's more in the thing of, can you look in the mirror again and say, I am the self that I would be proudest to be in front of anybody, no matter who they were, no matter what background, no matter whether they're lagging behind or trailblazing in front. And it's this sense of putting on the self that can deal with this before you feel that you can. It's a very fake it till you make it energy, but fake feels like the wrong word. You're not, it's more like a simulation, which again, relevant to this deck, no? You're simulating rather than emulating. You're making a holographic version of the self that you are literally about to be. I hope that makes sense, right? And I'm very aware that I've chosen a cyberpunk deck long before I sort of scheduled when I was going to do this reading. And then I've put on my neuromancer nails, right? And that's a thing I haven't done in a year or so with me. It's all very sort of simulation themed right now. And it is, like I say, it's a simulation, not an emulation. So you're walking in the shoes of the person who can deal with this instead of pretending to be someone who can. And that's a very distinct difference, right? It's very, it's not fake it. It's, if you can imagine it, you can actually do it, right? You're not faking if you have the concept of it already built. You're just living in that concept instead of whatever this one is, whatever this was. I really hope this is making sense. Please hit me up in the comments if it is. Let's move forward. So with the Empress, you are in a creative energy. You are in a dynamic where you can reconstruct who it is that you are to other people, reconstruct this sphere of circumstance that you can affect can be broadened by your creativity. Now, whether you believe that that's in a changing your reality sense, like many will on this channel, or whether you just think that that's like, no, if I really do knuckle down into my creative, luxurious, vibrant Empress energy, any gender, then I can expand the extent to which I'm the authority figure in my own life. I'm the, I want to say arbiter, I don't know whether that's the right word, but I'm the person who has the most control within the situation. You can birth that in this Empress energy. And what I want to say as well is that for many of you, music is a tool for this that should not be ignored. Yes, we listen to tunes to get us in the right vibe, but when I say it like that, it sounds so ineffectual, right? It just sounds like, oh, listen to a happy song and you'll be happy. And we all know it's not that simple. Instead, what I mean more accurately is when you're doing this thing of wearing the holographic self that will be able to handle all of this shit, I also want you to kind of make a playlist of the self that already has it handled. And I want to say, be very careful of the lyrics and the kinds of moods of the music that you're listening to just in this short period. You don't have to go on a media diet. I don't believe in this mental diet stuff. You've heard me do readings to extremely aggressive metal on this channel before. I don't actually think that that affects vibration when you're on a decent spiritual trajectory and you know who you are. I think it's very much like, it's not going to affect me, it's not going to freak me out, right? You build up defenses to that in the same way that you build up defenses to other people. So I'm not saying like, oh, cut out anything negative, as if that's even really a thing. What I am saying is, be very selective about the media you take in terms of music, podcasts, TV, etc. That it is in alignment with whoever it is that not only has all of this handled, but has more authority than the figure that you've kind of given authority or that you feel has authority over you. So if you were the boss over this situation, over this person, over this relationship to fatherhood or authority or protection, if you were the most protective thing in your own environment, what kind of tunes would you be listening to? Can you make a fun playlist of those things? Or can you at least hone in on one or two of them in the car on your way to work if you're a little bit more short on time, right? Music is going to be the thing to tap you into the Empress. And the Empress is one of the most creative of the major arcana, if not the most creative. This is why we have all the pregnancy imagery with it that many people feel is very outdated or very sort of gender biasy. And in this deck, you'll see it's absent. But what we have is several screens providing images which are all a part of a whole, projecting the same thing. And I notice it's a tree, so we're talking about putting roots in very firmly to an idea and then expanding out into the expression of that idea within the world, right? Developing your branches into concrete reality by having your roots in concepts that are all aspects of the same thing. It's making me think of like Pinterest boards, and I know not all of you use that kind of stuff, but it's this thing of like, that is a snapshot image of part of what I am. That is a snapshot image of part of what I am. And it doesn't have to be to do with fashion or anything like that, but it's just this sense of like, there is part of this overall picture that is echoed in a component that's somebody else's preference. Not all of that image will be what you want to become, but bits of it in combination with other images from other lives, from other mindsets, from other inputs, all together collaborate into this kind of cosmic picture of who you are. And I don't want to sound too woo with that, but I'm just saying, make the environment that you're in an assortment of ingredients that lead to the person who can deal with this and who doesn't give a shit whether anyone around you is being stubborn, whether anyone around you is being uncooperative, whether anyone else is working on their stuff, whether you in the past felt that they had authority over you or that you needed them to protect you in order to have authority over yourself. Because if you got this far into the reading, you are the authority of your own life, and that's what this moon phase is about, right? You see what I mean about it being sort of very ephemeral ideas that then have concrete results, okay? It's not that working on your mindset isn't going to get you somewhere in the real world, but with the sorts of cards that are coming up and with there being so many majors, this is very much about how you relate to you. And maybe in the next moon phase, if you do subscribe, we'll see like more concrete stuff. But right now, what I feel really pulled to talk about is how you're assembling the component parts of your own simulation. With the next card, with the sun, we're seeing success with this. We're seeing somebody who's happy. We're seeing more of these computer screens sort of bashing together to create an even bigger picture that depicts a symbol throughout many cultures of happiness, of light, of life-giving energy, of also with sunflowers sort of turning towards the sun, this feeling that other people are going to turn towards whatever it is you create and go, wow. Whether that's wow because it's miles away from the person that you used to be when you let other people have power over you, CP is for power in my last reading, or whether it's just that these are kind of people who are new to this entire thing, right? They don't have an idea of who it is that you've let go of in terms of self-concept. They just see the new you and they're going, blimey, that's a powerful person. That's a sun energy. That's a sort of dynamic that can only give just by being itself. And I don't mean giving in a depleting way to you. I mean that just by existing, your enthusiasm, your success will kind of have a knock-on effect on all of the people maybe watching on who aren't who can't communicate for one, but who also are not in as empowered a place as you have got to through doing this kind of, I don't even want to say inner work because it's not work, but doing this pleasant rumination upon who you would be if you already had this handled, and then just like stepping into that and being like, I don't have to work towards it. I don't have to do this step-by-step Eight of Pentacles thing of like, stage 1 is I go and do my workout. Stage 2 is I then start to believe this. No, you decide it, right? And you get so vivid a picture in your mind that you're like, oh, right, I get it. It is now. And then you step into it. I've been doing so many readings recently that kind of touch on this process. And again, I think it's because it's a current and not because it's like something I'm falling back on, if that makes sense. So please do let me know in the comments if it resonates with you and if this is something you're feeling moving through the collective as well. I just think, I don't know whether it's like an outer planets thing that's happening at the moment, because frankly, I'm, less than a year into maybe a 4-year astrology process of certification, but there's something big happening that is a wave of this, like, the thing I'm hearing in my head is that bit in Fight Club, even though like I don't align with Tyler's fascist values, but where he's got that guy at gunpoint and he's like, the question, Raymond, is who did you want to be, right? And in forcefully asking Raymond K. Hessel that question, he allows the man, through pressure, through trial, through the Holly King, right, to get to the point where he just is a vet. He just goes back to school. He just does it. And yes, it's because he fears for his life. And it's not a healthy dynamic in that movie, right? That's the point. And I don't want to miss the point of that film by using that example. But I also want to say, if at the moment the next few days feels like endurance to you, treat it as your Tyler Durden with a gun to your head saying, the question, viewer, dear beloved in the collective, is who did you want to be? Who already has this handled? What do they look like? What are their component parts? What are they dressed like? And how do they get to a place where they are not even freaked out by anything that's gone on recently, right? It's not even about what's gone on for you. It's about the version of you that just dealt with it, past tense. You know what I mean? Like it's not rehearsing a future you that has it handled. It's the distinction between that and just stepping into the version of you who is not even worried by it. Because that version can then take the practical action that you need to take. But I think if you go from the practical measures into, and now I believe this about myself, you may come across a stumbling block in the interim of like, but the practical action hasn't manifested in the circumstances. I need to spy on it. I need to keep checking in with it. I need to imagine that it's not all done, right? And I'm not saying imagine that it's done. I'm saying picture yourself having handled it and just step into it. It's not even an imagination exercise anymore. It's, the version of you deep down that couldn't give a shit about anybody having authority, even authority of ideas over who it is that you are. And you can just become that self. It doesn't take a process. It's a moment. It's literally like, oh shit, I'm already there, but like, look at my flat, it's not tidy enough, or look at the way I'm dressed, I'm not dressed for it. I'll just sort those things out because they're peripheral to this. They're not freaking me out. These things aren't the problem. The lack of finishing of a project isn't the problem. The lack of the relationship or the friendship or whatever isn't the problem, right? It's just that when you're already in this space of, oh, I have it handled, I'm not freaked out, then you look around you as that being who is your own protector, who is your own successful self, who already did it all, right? Who already listens to the tunes that are the most empowering, etc. And you sort of go, damn, if my environment isn't coherent with this, and I'm just going to sort of tweak it so that it is. And it's as simple as a god tidying up a globe at that point. That sounds very bombastic. It sounds very self-centered. But I want you to really step into that idea of perfect self. Not like self that other people will approve of, or self that's a bit better at work. Perfect self, God self. Very big ideas this week. If you are drawn to channels like this, and if you have any beliefs about truly being either part of the all, part of the God self, part of Christ consciousness, or, at a different way of putting that, operating as a co-creator of your own life, then what does the God co-creator version of you look like? I'm not meaning to blaspheme when I say that. Don't be put off if that's a problem within your spiritual beliefs. I'm saying that if you're in collaboration with that kind of power, right, then you're not worried. And that means that you're solving problems from the position of, I'm already okay. How do we just tweak things around me and do the most that I can do within my sphere of influence to be in concordance with this power which I draw upon, which for some of you will be externalized and will be a God you pray to. For others of you, it will be the best self that you can be in an atheistic sense. And for many more of you, in the magical sense, it will be the God self. It will be the co-creating power. Blimey, I didn't expect Holly Moon to be this big. Let's move on. Ace of Cups in reverse, or Ace of Vials in reverse. This is a feeling of you haven't had the energy, right? See previous reading with this deck that referenced Red Bull. But it's like you haven't had the energetic impotence to solve these problems in a practical way. You may literally have been feeling tired, burnt out. You may have been over or under sleeping. You may have had a relationship to personal energy levels and or energizing things like food, exercise, the company of others, etc. that has been out of whack as a result of like what you thought was this problem with an authority figure, but actually we're learning is just like stepping back into balance in a sort of, not in an easy way, but like in an instant way, in a way of just deciding, no, I'm going to operate from this simulation of power and see if it's any quicker for me to do it from that place than it is to say, oh gee, what are the steps between here and now and how crap I feel and that, yeah? Then we've got a supervisor of wires. This is the equivalent of the Queen of Wands in reverse. This is like lack of sexual energy, which also is lack of creativity. These two together are just expressing that somebody in your life is not being the most loving to you or the most creative or the most spurred on in relationship to you, or you've not felt creative, sexual, vibrant, luscious, your kind of frisky self, your self that is enthusiastic about circumstance and keen on the next twist and turn in the story of your life, as opposed to the self that is struggling to sleep, struggling to eat properly, struggling to keep up with workload, struggling to deal with how other people relate to you, as if the power is all on the outside of you and you're just kind of at the mercy of it with a tiny focus, with a tiny sphere of control. This section is busting this section. It's saying that's dog shit and you know it, right? You don't need the love offer. You don't need the cooperation, again, the collaboration of another person. You don't need to feel externally protected. If you're on a channel like this, you're either in a self-developmental space that implies that you are the protector of your own life, or you're of a spiritual paradigm that says that you have the ultimate protector to draw upon. You are part of the overall matrix of this. You're already in the same universe as the simulation of as your ideal self. So why is it that you're like looking at it as if you'd have no power? And I want to say this may have a relationship to childhood because of the Cancerian stuff and because of the father stuff. I'm sorry if this reading is very overlong and seems very woo, but I really don't feel this is as much about your circumstance this week as it is about how you step into yourself and what it is that you think the process to doing that is. It's not a stage by stage thing, my dude. It's literally just, are you there or are you not? And if you feel like you're not, you'll affirm that you're not, and then you kind of feel all the more distanced from co-creating self. But if you can get into the vibe using things like music, using visuals if they appeal to you, if you're a visual person, of like, oh, this is very close to my ideal, and you get like a fleeting image of your ideal, within that second, if you just allow yourself to step into it and look through the lens of that at your immediate environment and say, oh, what needs to be updated to be in this, to stay in this? What is it that I need to sort of catch up my circumstances with in order that I'm just concurrent with this all the time? And then you operate in dealing with problems from that place. That's a very different thing to saying, I am problem, how do I get to solution? With the Devil card and the tangles and the ties, right? Several people tied up with each other. So again, it's this interrelated thing. If you're in a relationship thing, this won't be news to you if I'm saying it, but it might be related to kind of ideas or projections of third party, of competition, of whether you're tied up with somebody else in the perception of somebody that you are giving power. But again, I won't be announcing third party on this channel if you don't already know, so that's only for some of you, where it's just reflecting that circumstance. For others of you, if this isn't relationship or there's no third party or competition involvement, this is, you know, the devil is an authority figure, and whenever we talk about this card, we talk about releasing ourselves from a bind, from an addiction to an idea or a person or a certain set of ideals that are no longer appropriate for our fullest self. This is slipping back into the feeling of being chained to something, which actually isn't the problem. The thing about the devil in the tarot is that actually you can be busted very easily. Ooh. Did you see that? Okay, the wands are off the table, right? What do I mean by this? Your passions, your addictions, the things that would have fueled you in this devil energy in a creative sense are now out of it. Like, creativity is only for good from this point. The wand has been bounced off the table entirely. It's now on the floor. This devil self that you are slipping back into, don't be afraid if you're of a paradigm that is freaked out by this guy. But this kind of addicted self is what I want to call it, is something that's being busted during this week. But in the process of being busted, it might come up for you again, right? So you might step into this, the simulation self, and then actually become the co-creation self, and occasionally have thoughts where you're like, oh, this is all an act. I'm just moving through it in a weird way. Excuse me, hiccups, confirmation. Firstly, if you get to that point and you find yourself slipping into the way that you did think a few days ago, come back to this reading, watch it again. That's something I want to say. And again, it's not for hits. You can download it if you want. It's just to say, like, remind yourself what we're on about here. And I think you'll be able to step easily back into this. Also using music to get back into it, because I'm seeing these headphones here and these wires to the sort of Baphomet figure that look like almost wired headphones. So to get out of this bind, put yourself in the position of power using the tools that we've already discussed, right? And then by the end of this short period, the executive of vials is the King of Cups. So this is emotional mastery, right? I'm also seeing the Zeppelin in the background. Zeppelins always make me think of the Smashing Pumpkins. And then what am I? Yeah, it's I was fast forwarding through a song that was in my own head, one of these songs for me actually, which it doesn't relate to the Zeppelin videos, but it relates to the band. And the line is, "We must never be apart." Now that might sound needy, but I'm not putting it in a relationship to another person as it might have been at the start of this thing. I'm actually talking about you and this self, right? We must never be apart. This King of Cups is somebody who has mastery over kind of everything, but particularly expressed within emotional mastery. This is somebody who, firstly, I'm seeing the biomechanical. So for me, this is Pentacles because it's related to the body, to money, to things like that suit deals with. There's also a very Pentacles looking sunset in the background. He's got that covered. He's also got ideas covered because I'm seeing this simulated thing down here. So that's the air element, right? He's got the sort of fire stuff because he's very full of wires. His eyes are lighting up. That in this deck makes me think of the wires energy. And then he's sipping from the cup, which represents emotion, which is to say that his emotions are integrated too. So even though we only see the emphasis on the emotional, right, the thing that we feel passionate about and we step into, the actual emphasis is on everything. And you are no longer set apart from the self that is fine with this. And you see how by the end of the reading, this stopped being about whatever this stubborn motherfucker is doing and became about you. And that's what I mean. Am I freaking you out? No, because I'm an executive of Vials at this point. Executive, they run the show, right? The king energy is the master of the kingdom. The executive, in this case, would be the equivalent of the CEO, right? He's ruling the roost, any gender. And in combination with this Empress thing, it's like, you can absolutely achieve mastery over whatever it is that's been bothering you. And you can see it as small fry by the end of the, I want to say week, but it's not a week. But by the end of this period before the next lunar. And it's almost like, I want you to get into a space where you see it as feasible that this will be trivial shit by next time. So I'm going to leave that with you. I'm going to invite you to revisit it if any of this seems a bit wavy gravy, or you're kind of like, but how does this relate to my circumstance in the world? I feel like I need to emphasize that so many times in this reading, and it's because so many of you came to me for this particular one, whether you're seeing it at the time or not, for like, this specific thing is happening in my reality. I want you to describe it as a reader and say specifically how I deal with it step by step. Very Capricorn. Also very Taurus, as mentioned. That's not where your focus needs to be at right now. That's why I've had to read it like this. The point you're coming to is an emotional mastery, which then reaches out into the other elements, reaches out into your circumstances in the world. This obstacle has not come up for you because you need to sort it out in a systematic way, or appeal to this person, or just send the right email, or just say the right thing, or just check on what they're doing a few more times, or even just act within your sphere of influence in a practical sense, although I encourage you to. The real change here is going to be the emotional shift for you between your, not even ideal, but your God self and the self that can't deal with it. I hope that was useful to you. If it was, please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. Please do consider donating or booking with me in the links down below. If it didn't resonate at all, I'd love to hear your feedback as to why, right? Any kind of feedback is appreciated on this channel. And if it was a bit woo for you, then that helps me to know who my audience is. But I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that you're seeing this the way that the cards are presenting it, which is that we're more concerned within this short period of the thing that we're seeing holographically in terms of you than the stuff that's manifesting as a result of that, right? As a result of perspective. This is all very cyberpunk. And I want you to get into the vibe of that, even if you're not a sci-fi fan, by saying, what is the hologram I'm projecting that is about to become the real self? Blade Runner 2049 might be a useful movie for some of you if you're thinking along these lines. Although, as I say, it might not be the most sort of optimistic if you're dealing with your perfect self form. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because I've already talked way too long for this one. But I hope that that is because it was comprehensive and not just because there's a lot to cover, right? Anyway, take care. Be your best self. I don't mean in the future. I mean right now. You've got this. See you next time.